Everyone, and welcome to this Studio webinar. We can see still some folks joining, so for the sake of having everybody on board, give us a minute or so and we'll start. Thank you. All right, thank you for your time. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everybody, depending on what part of the globe you joined today's Studio R2 Release 2020 webinar. Today, my name is Peter. I'm a sales engineer for Telerik and a test studio specialist. I'm going to co-host this webinar with my colleague Andy Wiwand, who is the manager of the sales engineering team in Telerik. Before we actually start with the webinar itself, in order to make sure that you can hear me well and see my screen, there is a little hand icon on your GoToWebinar panel. I would kindly ask you to press it if you can hear me and see my screen. Okay, perfect. I see a lot of hands raised, so we are good to go with that. A few housekeeping rules before we start the webinar itself. Today's session is completely recorded and will be made available for you guys right after the webinar. You'll get more information via email. And so after that, all of you are muted. So if you'd like to ask something, do use your GoToWebinar questions panel, because we can't hear you. So use the panel instead. And it's very important, although at the end of this webinar, we're going to have a dedicated Q&A session, we really encourage you guys to ask all of your questions during the webinar, so we have more time to answer you ad hoc. We are here with the entire Test Studio team in the background, of course, with our marketing managers, with our product owners, VPs. So we have the whole crew here, and we encourage you guys to ask us as many questions as you could and as you wish. The agenda for today, it looks pretty simple, but really have a lot of stuff to show you. So first of all, we're going to spend a few slides talking about what's new and an overview, brief overview of the new features for the Studio release, our summer release. And by the end of it, we're going to have a separate questions and answer session, as I mentioned. How are we going to do the demos? Actually, we're going to do them ad hoc. Me and my colleague Andy, we're going to switch roles. So whenever there is a cool feature that we announce and explain, we're going to switch for a quick demonstration of this feature and vice versa. Right, and in the middle, we have prepared a few, actually 3 poll questions for you guys, which will be announced ad hoc, and we would really appreciate your feedback and input on those questions. And something very interesting, one of you today is going to win a license giveaway for Test Studio Ultimate. We're going to make a raffle, which is taking place right after the webinar ends. So please stay tuned. We're going to contact the winner, announce the winner also on social media, in the corresponding awards. So please stay tuned. And also, by the end of this webinar, we have another marketing surprise for you guys. So stay tuned in order to understand what it is about. It will be announced towards the end of this webinar. With that said, before we start, I would actually like to fire up the first poll questions series. It's going to appear on your screens, and we'll give you a minute or so to answer the question, how are you currently testing your UI? Thank you very much in advance for your feedback. All right, I see a lot of answers, to be honest, that you guys are using manual testing for your UI. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll get some useful tips and tricks with starting and using automation. Right. But now let's get straight to the point and start with our Test Studio R2 2020 release highlights. I could differentiate the main features into 4 main chunks that we have introduced. First, for the first time, we are introducing a responsive testing type in order to automate your apps covering different scenarios and screen sizes or form factors. If you wish, stay tuned. There's going to be a specific exquisite demo on this new for Test Studio functionality, right? Also, we have enabled our OCR, enhanced validation and verification features, meaning that you now can use optical character recognition within the engine of Test Studio. And one more time, we're going to have a specific demo about this, how to use and take advantage of this feature, right? Manual DOM refresh, another cool feature that we have introduced with this release. It would allow you to auto refresh ad hoc or pause resume inside the recorder your DOM if it happens to refresh more than necessary or interferes with the recording of your tests. For the ones of you who are into the automation, you know, there are plenty of sites who recently do that. And we're going to show you how you can overcome such challenges, right? Last but not least, we have added our regular updates, including some dialog handlers updates for the remote execution machines. And also now we have the 0-day support for our latest browser versions, you know, especially around Chromium Edge, the second most popular browser already nowadays, which we fully support with Test Studio. With this set, I would like to go to the first chunk of features that we have introduced with our release, responsive testing. Allow me a few words about responsive and responsive design in general, in a kind of nutshell. Okay, first, it's definitely cost effective to develop. Why, you're going to ask? It's so cost effective to develop because it's easier to maintain. And why is it actually easier to maintain? Because technically, basically, you have only one web application which can be displayed on virtually any screen size, whether it's going to be the standard desktop, tablet, or phone devices. And displays nowadays, there is a much greater variety of such devices that we need to make sure that our application works well. All the Internet of Things applications, or if you wish, even your fridges, microwaves, etc., 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 and all the smart appliances that are coming on the market nowadays. And also, in order to validate all of this, statistics show that responsive design is, if not the only one, it's one of the optimal way to achieve a parity of access to the content of your application to all visitor types. Why should you use responsive web design? We have gathered a few statistics here. Most recently, as you guys know, that nearly 60 or even higher percentage of all the web traffic comes from mobile devices. You know that the mobile devices is becoming a part of us nowadays, and we can't live without them for some reasons. As far as the folks from Google are concerned, they definitely prioritize mobile page load speed as a key metric. So this is very important for your SEO optimization techniques for your application. And a bigger part now, and it's becoming bigger and bigger, of the total e-commerce revenue is from mobile. Everybody would like to shop from their mobile devices. A lot of factors here depend actually on responsive design, whether it's going to be the visitor retention or the ranking, as we mentioned, or the interest rates, the time on site, etc., etc., etc. They scale really well across, should scale really well across devices. And last but not least, if you have a responsive application, I'm pretty sure that you can convince yourselves into that. Your users, your customers, your end users, partners are much more willing to trust your brand if your website or app is responsive, of course. How this lives within Test Studio Ultimate Edition? First, we're introducing this feature of this kind of new test type, actually responsive test type, as supported by Chrome and Chromium Edge browsers only for recording and execution of your tests. You know, from the browser itself and from the console, you can go and emulate a mobile device or enter the screen size yourself, but it more or less creates some hassle, which is addressed in Test Studio, meaning that from the Test Studio itself, from the settings, you can just predefine once the screen size or the device that you want to emulate, and we take care of everything else, right? So you don't need to do any additional configurations and stuff like that in order to get started with responsive testing. Last but not least, there is almost no learning curve here because it's the same look and feel as if you're creating a functional UI test, web test, what you have been doing till now for the ones of you who are already existing Test Studio customers. You can also add, by the way, those responsive tests into test lists, which you can schedule for remote execution, or for execution during the different time of the day, you just need to select the device from the test list settings, and then you can run the list either locally, remotely, schedule it, or use it in conjunction with your CI/CD solution like Azure DevOps or Jenkins, TeamCity, Bamboo, etc., etc., etc. We support all of them, as you are aware. Before we start with the demo, since I want to pause my screen and prepare a test studio, we guys are going to start the second poll questions. So once again, a minute or so for you to provide your input on that, on the question for web apps. Roughly what percentage of your users are accessing via mobile browsers, if you know? Okay, talk to you in a minute. All right, the poll is now closed. Thank you very much for your input. By the way, from what I see, the majority of answers here is fall into the first tier, 0 to 25%. It's quite an interesting feedback to receive. I assume that most of you are working or will soon be working on introducing a kind of responsive or mobile-friendly version of your applications. Right. Anyways, thank you very much for the input. Now I'm going to show you in action the new test type in Test Studio, which is called a responsive web test. What you can see on Test Studio is my current instance. By right-clicking on the project, there is a new type of test, which is called Add Responsive Test, which you can create at any point of time. But before we go to there, as I said during the presentation, it is very important to go to the settings, right? And as you can see, there is a new section here called Emulated Device. And from this settings, from this setting, you can select the device of your choice. We're doing our best to constantly update, of course, with the most popular and recent devices. But don't worry if you miss something here, because at any point of time, you can select the option to manually edit settings and thus input the screen width and height of your device. Right. For my test, I'm going to use the iPhone X emulated device, and the same, as I mentioned during the presentation, the same is valid for the test lists. Whenever you go to the test list section of Test Studio and select a test list of your choice, you can go to the test list settings from here, and you're going to see a new tab, which is called Responsive Web, and select the device of your choice that is going to be used for this test list execution. All right, without further ado, I'm going to show you the sample test which I have already created in advance for you guys and explain why I decided to do so. If we go to a responsive website like telerik.com, for example. I'm going to open my browser and show you. So if we go to responsive website, we need to make sure that everything works fine during the Q&A process. Right. Let me switch the console here. I'm emulating again a mobile device, which is the same iPhone X. As you can see, the site changed and adopted my screen dimensions, but there were also some UI changes which you need to verify either manually, spending time, or automatically with a tool like Test Studio and the responsive testing features. What am I talking about? The first and foremost example is this little 3 lines, 3 dots, or hamburger buttons, whatever you like to call it, which is a standard for a mobile and responsive application menu. So you need to make sure that this button is available and clickable, and of course verify its contents. But also your responsive application can change the look and feel. For example, those elements here, which you see, those white bluish rectangles, they change their size, right? They have this size now if they are in responsive mode, but if I switch back to my web mode, you see that they have a totally different size. And that kind of stuff is something that you need to verify when doing testing on your responsive apps. Right. I'm going to show you exactly such automated test script, which is going to navigate to such responsive website. Make sure that the hamburger button menu is available. Play with the menu, access it, click it. Then check one of those rectangular elements and make sure that they're the correct size. Right, and then we're going to browse through the responsive application a little bit in order to make sure that everything is fine. For the test execution, I have switched the annotations on. This is a cool feature in Test Studio, which slows down the execution speed, and with yellow highlighted text shows you actually what is happening on the screen. Right. For browsing, recording, and execution, I have used Chromium Edge browser. Okay, and with that said, we are starting the execution of our test. As you can see, we're navigating to the website. It is already in a responsive mode because we have done this from Test Studio settings, so no need for you to do anything in advance. We're finding the menu button, the hamburger menu button, clicking, make sure it opens and closes. We're looking for the corresponding div. Here, in the case, it's a div. Make sure that it has the correct height, which I have predefined. Then we're browsing through the menu, opening our, what is that, Telerik UI for Blazor, and we're clicking on the grid in order to access the website. And the test is done. As you can see, all of those steps were executed successfully, so this responsive benchmark passed. All right. This is as far as the test and its functionality is concerned. As I said, you can simply create a responsive test as if you created a web test or a desktop test. Up until now, the look and feel and it's the same, so there are no hidden menus or options that you need to know and do. Just make sure that you have set the correct emulated device in advance. Okay, that's it as far as the quick demo is concerned. If you have any questions or comments, we would be very happy to hear them. Me and my colleagues are answering your questions now in the panel. as we speak, and we proceed in the meantime with the second feature, big feature that we have introduced with TestStudio R2 2020 release, and it's optical character recognition feature. Again, like we did with the responsive testing, I would like to spend a few words talking about OCR and what it is and how it can help you automate your applications better. So OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. In a nutshell, in brief, it is a way to extract text from an image, right? It could be an image, or actually it could be any type of image file or PDF file, if you wish, if as long as they're legible and there is text on them which you can extract, of course, via OCR. It is really helpful because imagine a scenario like you are working with a lot of invoices or product quotations, bank statements, and that kind of stuff. You know how much manual data entry is involved when you work with this, right? Thanks to a feature like OCR, you can drastically decrease the manual data entry itself, if not eliminate it at 100% in the ideal case. And of course, you can definitely create more robust automated workflows or more durable content by going digital with your documents, but still being able to access, automate, and test the text that is within those documents and content. How this relates to your automation tests, you might ask, and I have prepared a lot of examples here for you. Imagine such, you would agree with me, very difficult to automate elements like SVGs, right? Which contain dynamic or static data, whatever. They're definitely a challenge and kind of a hassle for most of the QA engineers and the testers out there, especially if you need to create special validation and verification of such elements. And what are these SVGs? You know, most of your examples and most common ones like charts, bars, pies, scalable icons, logos, whatever, right? You know, it can really be a challenge when when you would like to do some automation logic, to play some automation logic for them, which, by the way, requires to some extent the special scripting skills in order to interact with the DOM, right? While creating and maintaining those tests, which makes the situation even more challenging and problematic. And as I said, with some of the examples that we have with the new OCR features, you can decrease this frustration. As far as typical scenarios and applications that can come up to my mind are concerned, I can give you two examples with Salesforce and Tableau. By the way, for the ones of you who follow TestStudio team updates, and for the ones of you who are our existing customers, you know that we can fully automate applications built on Salesforce platform. Now, this started with the addition of the web components a few releases ago. Now we advanced these options with the introduction of OCR testing. And another big example, of course, is Tableau, for the ones of you who are familiar with that kind of web-based data viz or CRM-like applications. Right. What are those OCR features in TestStudio? In a minute or so, I'm going to switch to my colleague Andy so he can show you them in a live demo. But before that, let me summarize the options that you have. First and foremost, you have now full capability and options to verify any image within your application, right? You can automate the verification of logos, static images, etc., charts, the thing that we discussed. It is supported and can be used by any of the supported Test Studio browsers, right? And it's actually very easy to do during the recording option, and it's going to show you, you can capture any element or even a part of the element as an image and play a little bit. So apart from image verification, you can verify and extract the text from this image. So while using the OCR feature, you can extract the text from an image or a part of the image for elements with dynamically loaded content like charts, right? It's a very useful feature, and you can validate and verify even a static part of this chart. For example, the title or the axis, the labels, etc., etc., etc. Right? You can use the extraction step, create a variable, and then even reuse this variable into another test. Right? And here I have prepared two specific scenarios. For that, now it's much easier to validate a data against a database by meaning that you can verify that the correct set of data is loaded on your website, for example. Or imagine there is, most of us or some of us are constantly following the stocks of the companies, especially nowadays. Imagine you have savings calculator or something like that, right? Where you need to input the latest stock price or chart data or something like that. You can now very easily capture the image, extract the data from this image and input it into this calculator or something like that. Easy as we speak. All right, now we're going to switch to the last question of our poll series. And in a minute or so, we start with the OCR features demos. Thank you. Right, thank you very much for your input. Here, unlike the other two questions, I see a kind of parity and kind of equal percentages of answers with regards to this question of what challenges you best describe your testing strategy, which makes this feedback even more interesting for us. All right, guys, Andy, you can take control and show us the Blazor app with the OCR cool features.
All right, perfect. My screen should be coming up here any moment.
Yep.
Perfect. Great. Well, thanks everybody for attending today. We're pretty excited about really all the different features we've been able to continue to introduce to you and continue to evolve. So thanks to everybody for your support. So what I'm going to be able to show you today is first of all the OCR. So I'm going to use an example that I get a lot, which is, we have a system that's generating financial statements or things like that, and eventually those end up in a PDF, which gets essentially sent to customers. For example, a quote. So that's the example I'm going with, and I found a sample kind of quote to use, sample site that I can work with, and bring up that sample here just for a moment so you can see. And basically, this just has different PDFs. A great area if you want to kind of practice or play with this. This is on jotform.com, and what we're going to look at is this this quotation here as our template. We're going to build a test that's going to go into that PDF viewer and verify the content, some of the content of that particular PDF, and build our test from scratch. So to begin this, let me just jump up into my folder structure here. Now, as I'm building a test here real quick, I do want to point out that we do have integration with source control for Azure DevOps, as well as bug tracking integration, and a lot of CI/CD DevOps kind of integration points as well. I know there was a few questions in the chat, so I wanted to address that. We do support both Git as well as Azure, and integrate in many different ways to help you streamline your processes and your pipelines. So we'll begin this test, brand new test here. As you can see, I'll click into that test and we'll hit record. And as you can see, you can also record from any of these 4 browsers with the ability to play back and record, or sorry, execute against those 4 browsers, including Safari for Windows as well. So the idea being, you want to create one test that works on all of the browsers, right? That way you're not creating different tests for different browsers. So I've dropped in my URL, I've chosen my recording browser. I'll hit record. This will spin up the recorder, and it will, spin up the browser and attach the recorder here in a moment. So it's taking us to my little PDF sample page. Great. And we're going to try to do our best to split the screen. I'm going to go ahead and undock my toolbar. First of all, that'll be allow me to get more room on this screen. And just a moment, we're going to also check that behind here, you do see that it's captured my navigate step. So we'll be recording back here. This is really well served on a dual monitor environment where you have Test Studio on one screen and the browser on the other. But for the purposes of demonstrations, we have to kind of put it all on one. So apologies for that. But again, as I mentioned, we're going to come in here, we're going to click preview on this. We'll go ahead and add a maximize browser step as well. Since I just did that manually, I want to make sure that it's always maximizing the browser. So just to jump back in here, as you can see, you can move back and forth between Test Studio and the recording browser and add very specific steps and very useful steps, things like maximize browser, as you can see, test to step. So you're editing and you're recording, and this is really part of the Test Studio technique to basically build your test out. So I've got a navigate step. I click that preview button. Now I've got that maximize browser built in, and we'll jump back over to the recorder here. And then we're going to need to give this a look here. As you can see, this is really the pertinent part that I want to get out of it, which is the price. So let's do a couple things with this price. So first of all, I'll just give this a click. We'll turn on our Test Studio recording toolbar. So let me bring that back. I did undock it, so I can kind of move it even onto different screens. And I'm going to turn on the element highlighter here. And the element highlighter is a great way to look at an application through the lens of Test Studio. Now, of course, with PDFs in the past, this has been sort of a black box. You get to a canvas and all of a sudden you can't really see the elements that make that up. So that's why OCR is so important. As you can see, we can basically float over the frame here, and up at the top, I've got some options here to verify the text from the OCR. Also, you can see there's options to extract OCR from the image as well. So extract, a really cool feature. I'm going to show you that one next, but first we'll just hit verify. And this should give us a verification back here in our test. as it's loading up. Now, sometimes when you do a verification on a big frame with lots of text, it might take a little longer for it to complete the OCR, but we'll get a pretty healthy test step that comes back here in just a moment. Okay. There we go. Oh, looks like there's a little bit of a check there. Make sure I got the right frame. Sorry about that. So coming back, we'll, again, with the element highlighter on, just let me make sure I have the appropriate frame there. And we'll do the text, verify text from element image there. And again, sorry about that. I thought I clicked the right level there to begin with, but I think I've got it at this point. So now it's come back, and as you can see, it's pulled back all of the data from that PDF window. What I want to do is actually expand the settings here, and I'm going to trim this, right? I don't necessarily want to verify every bit of the entire contents of the PDF in one verification step. So one thing I can do to help me here is I can go ahead and add a specific item, in this case, the price that we were looking at. So we'll go ahead and add the price in here that we were looking for. And as you can see, I'm using contains compare type. So we're looking in that PDF window for it to have that particular value, right? And what's great about Test Studio, again, this technique of recording and editing, right here on the fly, I can right click this and use the run menu. And as you can see, since I'm in a live recorder, I can use run selected steps or run from here. So let's just run this step right back in the live version as we're here at this point in time. So when you use something like run selected steps, it's going to pop back over to the browser here. It's going to run that step. As you can see, I've got my annotation turned on just like Peter does. So I have the highlighting for me there. And once it's done its bit, we'll go back and look at the test step itself. And as you can see, it's come back with a green check mark. So we're getting an adequate verification of the price here showing up in that PDF. So that's kind of one variety of using OCR, verifying the contents of a canvas kind of frame like that, or SVG, as Peter pointed out. But I'm going to take this further because this is cool, but we can do even cooler. So we're still in live record mode. What I'm going to do now is actually use the float over menu and the build step options. So this basically is identifying the layer again that I want to work with, and build step is identifying to Test Studio that we want to use the Test Studio toolbar to complete, the creation of this particular test step. So let me go ahead and move things around a little bit so you can see better the appropriate window here. I'm going to go ahead and maximize the toolbar at this point. And as you can see, it's brought me down into this grid overlay area and this page area here that's contained within that, and this React grid kind of layout as well. So as we can see, it's brought us into those layers. Over here on the right, you have some verification options. Also, of course, you can flip over to your actions as well. Things like scrolling to a certain spot in the screen. I think there was a question about scrolling earlier. JavaScript events you can fire on a particular element, mouse actions like hover over and element to element drag and drop. There's just a lot of powerful things in here that we could talk about all day. But let's go ahead and this time use text from image. So it's really the same kind of function that I was just performing. However, this time, rather than using the entire image, I'm going to use just a part of that image. So let me see if we can make sure I get the window in the right spot here. There it goes. Okay. So as you can see, there's some options down here at the bottom. Let's see. We've got the, oh, I see it's on the wrong screen. I apologize. Let me make sure I do the appropriate layer here. And I'm just going to do that again. We'll do this selection. You can do the image verification in here too in the toolbar, and then of course the text from image. So you have both of those options available. Again, if we scroll over, so here's the price. little bit cut off. Maybe I need to adjust that a little bit more. So we'll set it one more time here. Make sure that the price is in the right spot, and we'll do the text from image again. And scrolling over, we'll find that particular spot. And then, as I said, with the settings here, we can choose the entire image, as we kind of did with the verification before, basically pulling all the text out of it, or we can do a partial. And so when I uncheck that checkbox, I can actually go draw my own position here and say, this is the spot where I want to pull that value from. And we'll go ahead and click extract text, and you can see instantly that it is pulling that off of the image for us. We have a compare type here as well, and at the bottom here, my add step. So this is another way to take advantage of OCR that is a lot more precise. And another big benefit here is back in Test Studio, where that test step was created, I can actually take this verification and change its role to an extraction. So now I'm effectively going into the PDF and pulling out whatever price is showing up on that particular quote at that given time. So this creates now for me a runtime variable, right? So we'll go ahead and call this quote total or what have you. And then to finish the rest of this test, what I'm going to do is actually take that quote total and go, now that we've extracted it, we'll actually just add a navigate step here. We'll use our common, use another navigate, and we'll go ahead and have this navigate over to Google, and we'll have it drop that price into the Google search bar, right? So there's my google.com. We'll actually use, again, the run selected step. So again, just moving through this test on the fly, working in toolbar, coming back to the surface. You know, you really have a lot of capabilities to record, and we haven't used any code, and typically there's not a much use for it unless you really want to get even more advanced. But what we continue to do with Test Studio is we continue to create features that don't necessarily require the coding capabilities, but you can still do many, many things with it. So here in Google, I'm just typing 123. I'm going to close the browser. That ends my recording. And I'm left here with that enter 123 in the test here. And this is the part where I'm actually going to take the quote total and data drive this text entry step. So when you have an extraction like this, and you can use all sorts of extraction, not just OCR, but other extraction options too. But you'll see that I actually have, once I save this, I'll have that in as a value. And I select the step that I want to data drive. And very simply, with a couple clicks, I see I can access that quote total from 2 steps prior and actually plug it in and set that to data drive this test step. So this should effectively go to the PDF, maximizing the browser, scrolling into the frame, verify the div. Actually, we can maybe move these around. Maybe I'll do that verification first after we maximize the browser, and then we'll do the extraction, and it should type that into Google for us. So let's go ahead and execute this and see how things look. I'll stick, as you can see, all 5 browsers here. I'll stick with Chromium Edge for now. And then quickly after this, we're going to jump into a Tableau example and also a Blazor example too, because Tableau, just to show you some of the new functionality that previously may have been out of reach, that this new OCR and web components functionality brings to life for you. So there we are, we're back in. Here's the first verification. And then we should see our scrolling there. Oh, we had a failure. We can actually jump in and verify that failure real quick. Let's see, it looks like the expected result was this. Oh, I didn't apparently save the trimmed version of that. So let me just jump into that. Use the contains operator. All right, again, you can manipulate all your test steps pretty easily there from there. Even if I wanted to use the continue on failure option, so in case that causes a problem, I can actually have it continue to the next step. So potentially even for cosmetic types of functions, you would use the same. So 2 different types of options here with OCR. The first one, verifying that the value is showing up that we want in the quote, and secondarily pulling a value from the PDF into a variable using that extract function, and then feeding that variable into some other part of our test, essentially. You could even take those variables, by the way, and pass them on to other subtests and things like that. All right, so here we are. It looks like we're down into the extraction. Now it's over in Google, and there's our price being typed into Google, so confirming that we were able to pull that. Looks like there was something I left behind here still on my first verification, but this gives you even more reason to maybe look at the second type of verification, where you can verify a piece of a PDF rather than taking the whole lump sum of it, if you will. So either option is available. Jumping quickly now to Tableau, an example here, I'm just going to use a quick run to here. Another way just to jump in and maybe add to a test or troubleshoot a test. We'll just jump into the end of this one real quick, and really just going to take you through what advantages now this new technology brings when working with something like Tableau or other data viz types of applications. Again, with a combination of web component capabilities and OCR, we now go many, many more layers deep into these applications. Previously, you wouldn't be able to see maybe, for example, that graph as being a separate component, whereas now it does. Previously, it was difficult to maybe work with drop downs in these types of applications as well. As you can see now, not a problem, right? So this is all brought to us by this new technology. And here in a moment, using run to here is great because it's going to run as far as it can, and then it's going to jump into the record mode. And of course, my recorder's over here. I can dock it back on my browser again if we like. And now we're in the live record mode. So let's just real quick turn on the element highlighter and take a quick look at this application, this kind of Tableau environment through the lens of Test Studio. So again, previously we might have seen this div layer, and all things inside of it may have been sort of inside of that black box. Now you can tell just by looking at what the element highlighter can highlight, all the different components that Test Studio can see that now make this up. And this, coupled with the ability, not only can I get deeper into the layers and identify and work with these different things more easily, but I can even use the OCR capabilities on top of that. So we're getting deeper, and we're giving you more functionality for those areas that can be challenging for you. So that was a quick example just to show you what that looks like on a Tableau environment. And last but not least, I'm going to just jump over to the a Blazor example for you. And I came over here into a failure. So again, make sure you're checking your failure details. This is one of the points where you may even integrate to your bug tracking system. If you've found a bug that you want to report to the team, this attaches all the DOM files, the log files, and everything, and images that are captured from that failure, and allows me to submit it directly into TFS or Jira or Azure DevOps as well. So I've got a bug submitted. I'll actually get a response back here any moment. And that response showed up on the other window, but my bug has been submitted. So I can also troubleshoot, and I can look through and see, what may have gone wrong here. But another thing I could do is, again, using that run to here option, jump into a live record mode, the step before my failure, to see maybe what's going on. This is a great strategy to get in and troubleshoot your tests. Run to here is just awesome. It puts you back into a live record mode. And when you're in your live record mode, you can really work back and forth between editing and recording your tests back and forth, and executing things on the fly and so forth. Now, another big benefit that we've added, and maybe something that you may not have noticed yet as this goes through its automation portion, and then it'll attach the recorder, but something else we've added that's a great feature for us is the ability to lock the DOM here. So we can come in and for a dynamic application such as this, you might see that it will pretty regularly refresh the DOM for me. And in fact, let me go ahead and we'll advance this over to, we'll pull this down a little bit. There we go. As you can see, again, element highlighter, and this is where you'll see for Blazor controls, and specifically you'll see some of these are Telerik Blazor controls that our translators are kicking in automatically and identifying the Blazor components. This means that this is going to be easy for me to automate, and there's going to be some added bonus verifications and options that are in here too. So not only can we work with Blazor, we can work really well with it. And if you're using Telerik Blazor, you're going to be guaranteed to have the best testing tool to automate your Blazor applications with Test Studio. Right, so the freeze DOM really helps again to, in this kind of stock market kind of environment to help with that. And I'm going to jump back here real quick just to the test. We saw that test step that was failing. Now I can actually let's just run the selected step while we're here on the fly. If we need to add some verifications in to make our test more bulletproof and so on. So as you can see, just a very strong, very easy to work with tool. There's certainly a learning curve as with every tool, but we have many training offerings, many service offerings available for you as well. With that, I'll go ahead and end my portion of the demonstration and turn it back to Peter to head us into the sunset.
All right. Yep. Thank you very much, Andy. Allow me to share my screen very quickly. Andy just covered the last portion of the remaining features, which was the manual DOM refresh and the auto refresh post resume option in the browser. So, as I said at the very beginning, there was a special surprise for you guys and a special announcement. Right, we got a gift for all of you at the moment, and watch your inbox for a special 30% off promo code for Test Studio Ultimate. Just pay attention and keep your inbox at bay to get more details around this promotion. Right. With that said, we have a few minutes remaining, and to which we want to allocate to a special Q&A session for you guys. But actually, you had tons of questions, which me and my colleagues were able to reply. I wish I could share a few with them, but there's so many, so it will take me a few moments to browse. I'm going to answer some questions publicly now, but in the meantime, don't stop your questions. We could even proceed a minute or so further after the actual presentation ends, so that we make sure that we answer all of your questions that you put into the panel. Right. So let me answer some of the inquiries online. Some of you guys were asking about the new features and in which editions of Test Studio are available. Here I'm combining several questions, of course. So as we mentioned, responsive testing is available into the Test Studio Ultimate bundle only, while the OCR feature is available in the other editions of Test Studio, including the Visual Studio plugin. We had a special question around it. Also, there were some questions around the browser's support. So what you saw as part of the presentation for supporting Chrome and Chromium Edge for recording and execution was valid only for the new type of test, which is the responsive test. For the rest, for the normal standard web UI tests that you have been using, we support all of the major browsers that are currently available. on the market, right? So I want to make this differentiation clear. All right, there were questions about how the responsive web tests were recorded. As we mentioned during the demo and the presentation, it's the same logic as if you are doing and recording a web test, right? Just TestStudio takes care of the additional browser configurations which are necessary in order to to put the application into responsive mode, right? I also see some questions that were not related directly to the new features, but we had a question about CI/CD support because we actually spoke about this during the presentation, and the applications we support. Basically, we can integrate with most of the popular solutions that are available out there, whether it's going to be Azure DevOps or Jenkins, TeamCity, Bamboo, etc., etc., etc. We got it covered. All right, there was a question if TestStudio supports WPF applications. Absolutely, although this was not part of today's demonstration. Can TestStudio work with Power BI frames, another popular application? Yeah, this is actually one of the benefits that the OCR features brings in to you as a benefit. And can you execute and browse through emulated devices simultaneously? At the moment, the only way to overcome this is to schedule test lists with each of the test lists with a different emulated mobile device. But as we speak, we are working on a feature so that you could do this out of the box. So stay tuned for more updates. All right. With that said, we finished the full 1 hour, which was scheduled for this webinar. I'm just leaving the session open for a minute or so because I see some of the folks still typing in questions, and now our team is going to address all of them. For example, can you support RESTful API testing? Yep, this is fully supported. Does Telerik TestStudio support WCAG standards? By the way, this is a very interesting question. We would be more interested into getting details from you with regards to your application and how it is built. You know, for the ones of you who are Telerik customer, the entire stack of Telerik UI is WCAG and section 508 compatible as far as our UI is concerned. Okay, as I said, we're leaving the session open to answering the questions offline. For anybody else here, thank you for your time. It was really a pleasure doing this webinar for you, and have a nice remaining of your day or evening. We'll be in touch. Thank you.